we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's January 27th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun, and this is Arirang's new daily morning program, News Generation, where young people make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good to be here again.
And Park Ki-hoon.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. We'll like to start off today with making a news feed. Every day we do so for the new generation, and we're looking at the top trending hashtags on social media over the past 24 hours. Here they are. The first hashtag is Republic Day. Many in India on Thursday celebrated their 74th Republic Day, a day to commemorate that the Indian Constitution replaced the Government of India Act. The second hashtag is Modi Documentary. It's a follow-up from yesterday's hashtag where we mentioned how a university in India stopped students from watching a BBC documentary on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They called it propaganda. The latest on this is that students were detained by the police as they were trying to watch it. And the last hashtag is National Pension. The Ministry of Health and Welfare will Friday to forecast when the national pension will run out. The latest forecast in 2018 said the fund would turn to a deficit in 2042 and be completely depleted by 2057. Now, if we bring the discussion here, why do you think these particular hashtags were trending, Ji-hee?
Well, with the first one, what's notable about this showcasing of India's military might and cultural heritage is that part of this year's parade theme was participation of the common people. So they had maintenance workers and even their families be seated in front of the parades, and this really displayed the whole diversity, which was part of the intention of this parade and the event. And the second hashtag Modi Documentary, so the recent banning of this documentary because it showed a dark side of Prime Minister Modi only brought more attention to this program with many people, students, even opposition politicians. They were protesting and even providing links for people to download the documentary, and several media watchdogs condemned the Indian government, saying that the restriction imperils the press freedom as well as the expression freedom online.
Right, freedom of expression. And the more they were trying to put shadows on it, the more light was shed upon.
That's right.
Now, Ki-hoon, what about the last hashtag?
You know, the last hashtag National Pension. You know, these are scary numbers, and it's a worrying sign because it's directly affecting the millennials and the Gen Z, because we are taking up a large portion of the thinning workforce in an aging population, which means that, you know, we're paying pension funds upfront, which we might not even able to receive when we actually retire. So I think this is a very worrying sign, and that's why we need a better and sustainable reform bill, not just for this generation, the next, but for the future of our country.
That's a very good point, and that is exactly why we should keep our eyes on this topic. All right, thanks for you two for making our news feed for today. And moving on, News Gen discusses different topics each day. Here's what we have for you today.
The younger generation in Korea aren't afraid of waiting in line to score a bargain. They're willing to wake up at dawn and run to the department store before it opens to get their dream bag, or simply wait out in the cold to try out the latest menu at a famous restaurant. Companies are well aware of this trend. Some were smart enough to launch apps for people to stand in line virtually. The number of people who downloaded these apps increased by 65% on year in 2022. Today, News Gen looks at 3 questions. 1. Why does the younger generation in Korea wait in long lines? 2. What do young people wait for? 3. Is this the case abroad?
As you just saw in the video, as soon as the buzzer rang, people would just go into all these department stores. Rushing. Exactly. And waiting in line for hours to buy something or try out a new menu, that definitely sounds familiar to me. What about you guys? Have you ever waited in line to go to the most popular bar or restaurant or buy the latest product?
I'm so ready to say my answer. Definitely. And mostly restaurants, not really to buy products, but to eat the food that I always wanted to have. And I would wait in line for not hours, but at least an hour, if it was an hour or 30 minutes or a little more than that, to eat the food that I really wanted. And I would plan for it. And there was this recent experience where I waited for this pork belly barbecue in Jeju Island. And it was really worth the wait. I waited for about a little over an hour. I went there before the opening hour. I
sorry.
think
Before
he
the
was
opening
very
hour.
surprised.
Did I hear something wrong? Pork belly, a few hours in line?
You couldn't connect the
A
dots.
little
eh?
over an hour.
A little over
Really?
an hour.
You can have pork belly at home.
No, but it's
sorry.
different. It's different. Really, you should try it. And it was really worth the wait. And what's good about these days is that because technology has advanced so much, I didn't have to physically wait in line. I would just use that app they have and line up online, really.
Right.
And I was going outside, just going eye shopping, window shopping while waiting for the pork belly. And it really was worth the wait.
You were very smart about it. You planned
I was.
it, and you eventually achieved what you
Yes,
wanted to.
that's right.
Now, Ki-hoon, I can see your facial expression. You're shaking your head. I'm guessing that you're not the type of person to wait in line.
I'm not. I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you, Chi, on this
Okay.
point because, you know, I've actually lined up once at a restaurant and it wasn't really worth the wait because it didn't meet my expectations.
Right.
When I entered the restaurant, it was crowded, it was noisy, workers were running around serving the right food at the right table, and I don't think I received the service that I expected. And for me, you know, when I'm hungry, I just want to eat. That's all. I wouldn't want to wait in line just to have a meal because,
Right.
you know, at the end of the day, a meal is just a meal.
Yeah.
And plus, you know, when you are around those famous, popular restaurants, around those restaurants, there are other restaurants
Right.
that aren't as popular but have, you know, decent tasting food. So that would be my choice.
So if I can sum up, you're the type, if you're hungry, you would just go to another restaurant.
Exactly.
And Chihi, as
I
long
would
as you
wait.
plan for it, you would wait for it because you want to achieve that.
Yes, that's right.
We are very different.
Very
We
different.
are.
And Chi, because you waited in line outside for a few times, why do you think that the younger generation does this? What are they waiting for?
Right, so this is really a new culture for the younger generation, and they don't just wait for these restaurants, they wait for pop-up stores, new experiences, and even to get products or luxury brand goods they want. And they see the worth in it. And some examples are sticky rice cake. They had this sticky rice cake, chapsalta, we call it in Korean, in a mart people waited for. And there was this special chicken brand, and also single malt whiskey, bread, egg tart.
The list
all
goes
these.
on.
The list goes on.
And it's
What
so funny
not?
because you mentioned you're a foodie
Yes,
and you're
I
mentioning
am.
all food products.
I know. Of course, people are lining up for other stuff as well,
Right.
not just food stuff, but I've mentioned all the food stuff here because I'm a foodie. And experts explain that this is all because of the little concept that we talked about before, sohakeng, the little but certain happiness that people get from little sources in life. And they also have what's called the 득템력. It's the ability to get something, accomplish, gain
Achieve
something,
gain something.
that you want. And people find satisfaction in buying or getting the things they want by putting in their time and effort into that experience of lining up.
Right, and I know that apart from food, there's also pop-up stores where you can wait in line to gain that experience,
That's right.
And Ki-hoon, as Chi mentioned very briefly in her first answer, there are people who don't want to wait in line and would rather much prefer to use online apps
Right.
or hire somebody who would do that for them.
Yeah, people do that these days, and it's apparently called line standing service. So where clients would pay line or queue standers to line up for them to buy the products and services they want instead of them. And you know, these people would get paid up to 120,000 Korean won.
Whoa.
So roughly $100 for these luxury brand open runs. So I think for a lot of youngsters who have a lot of time on their hands, it is a good way, easy, quick cash for
Right.
them. And I think this definitely leads to a change in consumer behavior where a lot of the younger generation, we're falling into that lazy economy where we're willing to pay for more convenience and comfort. That's why I see in turn a lot of businesses trying to fit this new model to, you know, meet the trend.
Definitely, it's all about efficiency, right?
It is.
And Tiki, you seem to know about these options already, as you did in Jeju-do.
Right.
And are there any other tips you can give people who want to wait in line for hours?
Oh yes, I have some tips, but before that, it was really a culture shock for me to hear that people are paying these other people to line up for them. And I actually heard about this concept a decade ago from a book called What Money Can't Buy.
Excuse me, a decade ago?
Yes,
And
really.
you remember this?
Yes.
We are very different.
You're so passionate about this topic.
I don't remember a
it
book I
was.
read yesterday.
It left a huge impact on me, you know, but I'm really glad that it has become a new trend, a culture among people, paying others to line up for them. So I think the writer of this book was very insightful. Anyway, so my tip for you would be if you type in like hashtags such as waiting hell,
Waiting hell,
Waiting hell?
meaning
it's hellish to be
hellish
waiting
to be
outside.
waiting.
It is.
Yes, it's a direct translation from the Korean term waiting 지옥. And they also have what's called banqueting. It's a compound word of bread and ticketing. So you're lining up like as if you're ticketing for that bread you want.
Banqueting?
Yes, banqueting.
These hashtags are so new
I know.
to you.
These
Banqueting. Okay,
hashtags.
banqueting.
So these hashtags, if you just type them in, you could search for information that people share online, and they tell you how to line up well. They give you some tips. So my tip for you will be to become a good researcher. If you want to line up for a restaurant or a product you want, then search them on the internet, and people have even open chat rooms where they share information on
Right,
this.
so compile as much information as you can before you go outside and start waiting.
Right, so I just want to add one point. I did some research on why people line up and how they can line up. And you know how Chi mentioned there are group chats? In that chat room, they tell you the list of things you need to line up.
Like what?
A small tent,
Oh,
even a sleeping bag, camping chairs, and of course that spare battery. Because you're going to run out of battery.
especially if you're on your phone.
Exactly. So
Right.
it's quite interesting to see that. But something that I would never do.
It's something you would never
I
do,
would
but
never do.
good to know, right? All right, now let's find out what is behind all these long lines we see outside doors and restaurants. Joining us through Skype is Dr. Jared Watson. He's an assistant professor of marketing at NYU. Welcome, Dr. Watson.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we have better reservation systems and apps that do the waiting for us, as we just mentioned. Regardless, why do you think the younger generation waits hours outside a shop or a restaurant? And if there are any psychological traits behind this type of behavior, please do explain.
Definitely. Yeah. So, when we think about consumer behavior, what's important to understand is that consumer behavior isn't random. It happens for a purpose, right? We have a need, and so we look for a solution to that need. Those needs can vary a multitude of ways. Oftentimes, we simplify it. So we say, if we're hungry, we'll seek food. If we're cold, we'll seek shelter.
Right.
However, the value we actually get from that behavior can be divided, and it has multiple inputs. So thinking back to these examples of when we've waited in line and when we haven't, or why we wouldn't, we often neglect the social influence role of waiting in line, right? And what I mean by that is, how often do we wait in line by ourselves versus how often do we do it with friends or family members, right? Oftentimes we find that we're going to this new restaurant with a friend or with family. And so the experience as a whole, right, we derive utility or we derive value from the social impact of being around these people we care about. It's not just about the food. So that's one potential avenue. The other thing I heard you mention was, why would I waste my time doing this? I can just outsource it and pay somebody to do it. And it gets back to the fundamental idea of, well, what are the benefits that matter to me, and what are the costs associated with those benefits, right? And ultimately, we trade off things like time, like money, certainly like our energy, the knowledge required, all of these things, and we decide, is this worth it to me? I think another important sort of thought of that is just scarcity. So sometimes it is, I really want this, and there's a limited quantity, and the only way to access it is to get in line.
Right. So it's all about what you prioritize and whether you value the experience or whether you really just want that product. And
Absolutely.
I would like to ask you too, if you have any questions you would like to ask Dr. Watson.
Right, so Dr. Watson, is this whole phenomenon a Korean thing, or do you think, or do young people abroad also have this tendency to wait in line for something they really want?
Oh, absolutely. This is an international thing, right? We all have these same fundamental needs. We might pursue them slightly different ways, but ultimately we see queuing around the world. Myself, I go through this almost every weekend with my daughter, where we think about going to stand in line at a fancy donut shop in New York City and waiting for that donut. Certainly, we could just order them and have them delivered, but that loses some of the fun. Watching my 3.5-year-old get excited, think about the flavors she might see, watching additional people queue in line. And so we see this time and time again around the world for a multitude of products, services, and experiences.
And Doctor, one last question is, how are businesses using this type of consumer behavior for their benefit?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so I think strategically, businesses are starting to understand fundamentally that queuing provides value because it enacts curiosity within individuals. There are times where people have no idea what a business is, but they see a line for that business and they say, I should probably join that line. I have this fear of missing out. So how do I make sure that I don't miss out on that opportunity? Let's just go hop in line and we'll sort the rest out later. One example of another place in New York City, ice cream shop with a large storefront. They actually have the cash register right by the door. So they can only fit about 3 people inside before the cash register. But once you pay, there's space for another 30 people to stand around and wait. And so if they had simply moved that cash register to the other side of their counter, they could have 30 people inside.
Right.
But then they don't have the line outside of the door for all the passersby to say, what are those people standing in line for? Right? So I think that's strategically one avenue. The other one is these limited releases. So certainly limited quantities, limited time windows, only providing access in certain ways, like we will not sell this on the internet. You have to show up in store to purchase it. A multitude of strategies are used to create these queues to allow other consumers to have that fear of missing out, understand what the scarcity might be, and also ultimately drive our desire to value that product, good, or service more.
Right. I think these are all really good points you pointed out there, the consumer psychology behind that and how businesses use it. Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, now if we bring the discussion back here to the studio, what point of Dr. Watson's fascinated you the most?
Well, there were some important keywords that Dr. Watson mentioned, such as scarcity and curiosity. And I also liked how he mentioned this is an international phenomenon, and he emphasized the fun and the excitement behind the experience of lining up, Ki-hoon. Yes, that
I'll
was...
have to agree with Chi on this point. Because when Doctor mentioned, if you are lining up with your family or friends, that becomes an experience as well. So if you value that more than just waiting in line, I think that's a good point.
Right. Now, let's hear what our viewers have to say on this topic. Given that we are a live morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance, and we use this time to share with you what they had to say. If you take a look at the screen, we asked when our viewers would wait in line, and Amber Alert said, lining up outside a concert hall when I had a general admission ticket to see Taylor Swift. And Mike picked 9011 said he waited 5 years to talk to a girl. That's also a type of waiting. Sushi Queen 96 said, I queued up in line before the department store opening hours to get my hands on a Chanel bag. Now, all of these comments are from our viewers. What did you guys think about them?
Well, I can totally relate to all these comments. Although no one mentioned anything related to foods or restaurants, I do agree that it's really worthwhile to wait for something that you really like. Yes.
What about you, Ki-hoon?
Yeah, looking at the second comment, Mike picked 9011. My English name is Michael, so...
Is it you?
I thought it was me, but obviously it's not. But, waiting 5 years to talk to a girl, I mean, I hope this person is not single, in a relationship with this girl,
Right.
enjoying his life, because wow, that takes a lot of courage.
A lot of courage.
And patience.
Patience and dedication. And I also found it fascinating. We talked about open run throughout the day, how someone would wait outside the department store, and as we saw in our VCR, just run as soon as they hear the buzzer of the opening hours. All right, and every day we do upload questions related to our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. And if you want to participate, please search Arirang News on YouTube and look into our community tab. The link is right below. Now, we've already come to the final part of our discussion for today. And Hyun, I'd like to ask you the question first. Are there any things that concern you when it comes to this waiting in line for hours culture?
Well, to begin, I'm a firm believer of everything in moderation. So I do understand that we're living in a fast-paced society where, trends are changing ever so quickly. And of course, millennials and Gen Zs are always moving to and seeking new trends. That's why we see this sudden hype and just dying down of these trends. So I found that a lot of people are just ending up buying these products and services, like what Doctor mentioned, from like fear of missing out. So just for the sake of buying it and just to kind of show off to the world, I got this as well, so did I, I'm part of the group. But I think with me personally, my advice would be, you lose the value and fun in purchasing things you really like if you just buy the things that other people are buying. So, stay truthful to yourself and just maybe look into yourself and say, do I really need this?
Right, I think that's some really good advice that I should be taking into account as well, because sometimes I do feel pressured to buy this because everyone seems to have it. It seems really cool.
Right.
And Chihi, I would like to ask you the bright sides of this culture then.
Sure. I think it all comes down to that concept of 소확행, or the little but certain happiness that we gain. People are feeling happy about getting what they want after putting in their time and effort into that lining up. And if we take a look at the places and things that people line up for, they really have their worth. There's a reason behind it. And in times of such uncertainty, economic recession, it's good to see that people are finding these little sources of happiness during these hard times. And unlike the older generation, when consumption was only about purchasing and owing things, it's really about, for us, for the younger generation, it's really about the experience. So that's what makes lining up for hours worthwhile, I believe.
And as our Skype interviewee, Dr. Watson, mentioned, it depends on who you're with, too, with your family members or friends, as long as you have a very good time. All right, today we talked about the lining culture, where we wait in hours for line to get something we really want. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee.
Thank you very much, Ian.
And Park Gi-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, both of you, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll all see you next week. We are News Generation.